Tak jo, nějaký další dotaz publika máme? Dobře, tak já kouknu tady do našich elektronických dotazů. A jeden, který mě tam zaujal, byl takový aktuální. Ptá se na to, jestli si myslíte, že posilování populistických stran v Evropě může někde naopak dojít k odebrání práv menšin. My vidíme v mnoha státech v Evropě, nejen v České republice, že vznikají strany, které mají jaksi v programu oponentní postoj vůči rovnosti LGBT lidí. Asi v jiné míře v Holandsku, než třeba v České republice, než třeba v Rumunsku, ale myslím si, že ten nástup nebo jejich takové jako objevení se na té politické scéně je něco, co se děje jak na evropské úrovni, tak na globální úrovni. A jak byste ten trend dokumentovali? Jestli se to děje u vás v zemi, tedy pozorujete strany, které mají více, řekněme, homofobní postoje než někdy v minulosti, nebo to mají přímo programově. A co si o tom téma myslíte? Kdybych chtěl na mou otázku komplikovanou odpovědět.
It's really a complicated question, but in the Netherlands, maybe it's different from other countries that the extreme right-wing parties, populist parties, they are very much against migration, new immigrants, and they use the immigrants as some kind of scapegoat in order to get more popular votes. And one of their instruments in doing so is to say the gays are ours, and if you don't like the gays, then you don't belong to the country, to our country. So they actually say that they support LGBT rights in order to have an instrument against new immigrants and Muslims and Islam. But when you look at their voting record in the Dutch Parliament, you see that they hardly ever give supportive speeches for LGBT rights. When there are votings, they just leave the room. They sometimes even, especially when it is about transgender issues, they vote against it. But the detrimental effect, first of all, is that they target migrants as a minority, is that some other groups find inspiration that if politicians dare to single out a certain group and diminish their rights, certain groups think, hey, well, if you do that with migrants, you can also single out another group. And so it could have an effect that other groups are also affected by the fact that equal rights are not there for everybody. So I think it's a task, also a moral task, for politicians to stand up for an inclusive, tolerant society where everybody would have the same rights.
Sorry. Yes, just to add, firstly, I strongly agree with Boris that it is the moral duty of politicians to stand up for these things. Equal marriage has been achieved in different ways in different countries. In some countries it's been achieved by plebiscite, by referendum. So countries like Ireland or Australia put the decision to the people. There have been some states prior to the Supreme Court decision, in the US I think, that even that did that. And in other countries it's been achieved by the courts, where fundamental rights have been enshrined at the instigation of the courts. In Brazil, the Supreme Court was responsible for the constitutional rights, which now give some protection to LGBT people. In other countries, it's legislatures that have initiated these changes. The UK is an example of that. But we have to be vigilant where these rights have been achieved. They can be susceptible to these populist forces. And we do see a tale of two worlds. A world where some countries are making remarkable progress, and we should be encouraged by that. but another world where LGBT rights are either standing still and are suboptimal, to put it mildly, or worse, are going backwards. And it is an uneven pattern. And I think we need to start looking a bit more closely at the reasons why, not just trying to deal with this in each country, but what are the drivers for this, so that we understand them. And I think there is one uncomfortable truth, which is that if you overlay a map of the world and look at where LGBT rights are going backwards, or LGBT people are being put under pressure, that there is a strong correlation with a map that would show you where religious fundamentalism is taking a hold, in whatever religion you describe. So whether that is in sub-Saharan Africa, where particularly evangelical Christian churches have been promoting a very hostile environment to LGBT people, regrettably with a flow of money coming from the United States to those churches, or whether it's in countries like Russia, where the combination of the Orthodox Church and then a political climate that wants to build on a kind of nationalism creates a hostile environment, or whether it's as a consequence of fundamentalist Islam in some other sub-Saharan African countries and in Asia, for instance in Indonesia or Tanzania. There is clearly a correlation. And that is something that I think we are going to have to think about in future as to how we tackle that. It of course affects a lot more than LGBT rights, but LGBT people are often brunt of discrimination as a consequence. And it not only impacts upon human rights, but impacts upon things like health programs in Africa, where people are discriminated against, and these effective health programs cannot be delivered to people because of the environment that is being created. So I think my message is we continue to have work to do globally, and that does rely on us, those of us who subscribe to fundamental values of equality, standing together and being willing to promote those values. And in June, I launched a Global Equality Caucus of parliamentarians from across the world who came together to say that we would stand together, that we would promote LGBT rights, promote an end to violence and discrimination, promote equality, promote equal access to health care, ensure that data is collected so that we know what's happening in countries where there is discrimination, and support NGOs on the ground. And I hope that by working together, we will be able to focus on these countries where, frankly, a lot more needs to be done to ensure that people are safe, and where their fundamental rights need to be protected.
Thank you.
I believe the question was about, will populist movements threaten LGBT rights in the Czech Republic? And the thing to remember, of course, about populist movements is that they reflect the country in which they are occurring. So a populist movement in America looks slightly different than the populist movement in the UK or in Hungary or wherever else. And in the United States, when our current president rode a populist movement to power, we had already won a victory at the Supreme Court affirming the freedom to marry across the country. And so President Trump felt some need to embrace LGBT rights because they had already in part become the law of the land, and he knew or understood it would be very difficult for him to roll that back. So the best way to inoculate the Czech Republic from a populist movement rolling back LGBT rights would be for the current parliament to take up this bill and pass it into law so that future governments understand this is already a part of the society here, and likely that would help be part of the best protection going forward.